Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute's Next Round podcast. I'm Rowena Ichon, COO of PRI. This podcast features Marcos Bretón, who oversees the Sacramento Bee's editorial board. He's been a California newspaperman for more than 3 decades. Tim and I, a vice president of marketing and communications, and Matt Fleming, director of communications, both at PRI's Sacramento office, chat with Marcos about the latest political and policy debates going on at the state capitol. Thanks for joining us.
Just released from Encounter Books. Read the new book from PRI's Sally Pipes, The World's Medicine Chest, available now at your favorite online bookstore. The World's Medicine Chest explores how America became the world's leader in biopharmaceutical innovation through market capitalism. But as Sally Pipes writes, America is the last best hope for millions around the world who are battling rare diseases and chronic conditions. As you'll read in the World's Medicine Chest, we can do more to fight and cure disease, but only if we continue to embrace private sector innovation over government regulation. Buy the World's Medicine Chest today at Amazon.com or your favorite online bookseller. Marcos, it's great to have you on Next Round. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So let's start with a question about the city that we all call home. It's been my home since 1998, I think, is when I moved here, and it's at Sacramento. And, you know, Sacramento, there are many great things about Sacramento, but it's a city of many problems today. And, you know, while we see some positive signs of projects and development being approved, just walk down the street and you see there's a lot of major issues with crime and homelessness and the city budget, certainly among other problems. So from your perch, what's your view of where the city of Sacramento is headed today? You know, are things on the right track, the wrong track? Where do you see us now and kind of where we're headed in the coming years?
I appreciate the question. I think the city is struggling right now. The city is functionally broke, in large part because of its pension obligations. And the city of Sacramento, like all the cities, major cities on the West Coast, have really struggled to adapt to the issue of homelessness. I'm not going to say there haven't been some marginal improvements, but I think all we have to do is walk around town to see that there are still way too many people who are on the streets. And I think we've reached a point in Sacramento, as in other places, where people are really starting to ask hard questions about the way we've addressed some of the major societal issues that are impacting our cities. And with homeless being, homeless / drug abuse / mental illness at the top of the list. And there's been a tremendous amount of money raised and spent on the issue, and it continues to proliferate. And I would say, as someone who has lived in Sacramento since the end of 1989, it's been sad to me to see our quality of life erode to this degree. And as an opinion journalist, I've really landed where I think the issue of homelessness and how it impacts our cities in California is a microcosm of the larger problem that Democrats are encountering with the voters who are fed up with slogans and talking points and justifications that are disconnected from our everyday lives. I was telling a friend the other day that I feel like I kind of repeated some of the liberal talking points on homelessness for the last decade, and I'm done with that. I'm done with that. So to answer a long answer to your question is, I love Sacramento. I made it my home. I had only been here maybe once or twice before I moved here, and they were just day trips. I never, growing up in the Bay Area, Sacramento never entered my thoughts, my consciousness. And then when the Bee hired me and my spouse at the same time at the end of '89, completely different world back then, I thought it would be a 2-year stop. And I've been here for 35 years. It's because I really love the community, but we have big challenges and big questions as to whether our elected officials and the people who are charged with dealing with our serious issues are up to the challenge.
I feel the same way as you do. When growing up in Santa Clara, it seemed like a world away, even though it's only 2 hours away. But now it's home, and it's such a great place. And we hope our elected officials can get their act together and get it right.
Yep.
Marcos, just to echo what you and Tim just said. I mean, I moved here in 2016 maybe, and I had already lived in San Clemente and Los Angeles too. One's really beautiful, one's really exciting, and moved to Sacramento with really low expectations. And the truth is, like you both just mentioned, I mean, I made a home here. I love it here. I moved here when Kevin Johnson was the mayor, who nobody's perfect, but I thought he was a pretty good mayor, and it seemed like Sacramento was headed in a really great direction. If using no other metric than just the status of K Street, but it seemed like Sacramento was headed in a really great direction. And I wasn't a great fan of his successor, but he was a little bit more moderate, I would say, than this last election. I think historically speaking, Sacramento's elected sort of center-left Democrats to the city council and mayor, but this last election was a little bit different. Kevin McCarty was maybe the moderate candidate compared to his ultimate opponent, but the moderate candidates in the primary lost, and then voters were left with a choice between Kevin McCarty, who is pretty far to the left, and I don't think he would push back on that, and then Dr. Flo, who was a self-proclaimed socialist. So this sort of begs the question. I mean, was this an aberration, or has the city's political identity changed a bit?
I would argue that the city's political identity has evolved to where there is a population of younger people. It's basically the next generation who've either come here from the Bay Area, primarily came from the Bay Area, who are politically active and more liberal than it's a more liberal cohort than what we've experienced in Sacramento before. In my time here, Sacramento has typically elected very experienced, reasonable people to be the mayor. And remember that, and this is the way the city wants it, much of the power in the city rests with the city manager. And so mayors, it's so funny. It's a government town, and yet so many people don't understand that that's actually, you say that to people in conversation and their eyes glaze over. You know what I mean? But it's really an important distinction, because the mayor can set policy, can help set policy, because you have 9 members of the city council, but the person who is the boss of the chief of police and the fire chief and everybody who are pulling the levers of government is someone who is appointed and is not elected. And so you typically have people elected to mayor who are, as you say, are moderates. And the last Republican on the city council was the late Robbie Waters, who's been sheriff, and I don't know that we'll ever see another Republican elected to the Sacramento City Council, which is not good. But Kevin McCarty is certainly coming up through his political career, certainly supported by labor. But he became the de facto choice of business, even if business didn't invest a ton of money in his campaign, as you say, because people in business were concerned about his opponent, and were concerned that his opponent was too liberal for them. But I predict that Kevin McCarty is going to evolve, has already evolved, and is going to continue evolving and moving to the center, because he has to. The majority of the council, I think, are centrist Democrats, and I think that people should really pay attention in the coming weeks to when the council starts talking about, for example, an audit of homeless services. And I think that, as I mentioned in my first answer, there's people are starting to ask harder questions. And I think that even Democrats are, after 10 years of just, as I said earlier, sort of mouthing the talking points about homelessness, are rightly asking, what are we doing? what are we doing here? And so it's going to be interesting to see if Kevin McCarty is skillful enough politically to be able to have that conversation, to be able to have the hard conversation about homelessness with that liberal cohort of people living in the city. Because to have that conversation for real is to say out loud that we have to do something if we offer someone a place to get off the streets and they say no. What do we do then? And you're seeing cities like San Jose. Mayor Matt Mahan has been very vocal in the last couple of weeks, taking aim at Governor Newsom and others because he is trying to instill metrics and accountability to not only to the elected leaders, but to the city bureaucrats that their compensation and upward mobility is going to be tied to results. I'm curious to see if he can pull it off, and I'm curious to see if Sacramento can ever have that conversation. Because it's needed in Sacramento, and I think that Mayor McCarty understands that already, but whether he can actually preside over a dais that has that conversation for real and withstands the heat from younger progressive, whatever progressive means, liberals in Sacramento, it remains to be seen.
I think another issue kind of along these lines, and really I applaud the columns you wrote on this when it was, kind of more in the news on a daily basis. They're really interesting reads, was this kind of issues with our school district kind of dominated by the Sacramento City Teachers Association and kind of these same things, right, where there are really a lot of problems in the city schools financially, test scores, really has a lot of voters questioning, are our public schools getting the job done? And what's it going to take to get them to do kind of the basic thing, right, is educate our kids and have them prepared for whatever they want to do in life. And I can appreciate, from your perch and in this town and kind of given the politics of this town, it takes a lot of courage to kind of call out, a particularly blustery teachers union leadership. So I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit about what's happened since that time. Maybe you could take us a little bit behind the scenes. What kind of blowback do you get as a columnist, when you write interesting, important, and provocative columns like that? And, kind of where are we at now? Do the problems exist? What does the future hold for our city schools?
A couple things. So it starts with a simple question that I have had and asked in columns that I wrote: does Sacramento, and by extension California, care about public education beyond the compensation and benefits for teachers? And I have concluded that the answer to that question is no. Any conversation about public education pays lip service to the achievement gap between students who happen to be born into challenging socioeconomic conditions and students like my kids who were fortunate enough to be born into a middle-class home, because it's just lip service. The issues related to the achievement gap, the issues related to special education, the high suspension rates of Black students in our public schools in Sacramento County, they don't get much traction. But what gets tremendous traction is compensation and benefits. For me, the son of a Teamster, it seemed to me just common sense that if state auditors are saying to you as a school district that you have to bring your healthcare costs in line or you're always going to have budget problems, that it just common sense that you would want to address that. But in my opinion, the teachers union in Sacramento was more than willing to burn the district down to hold the line on that entitlement. There were all kinds of narratives that were constructed about other issues, but as soon as the school district backed down on trying to address out of control healthcare costs, as soon as they backed down on that, strike was over. And a strike, mind you, in what year was that now? I'm losing track. 2022, right after the pandemic, where my children in public schools, they missed the tail end of their sophomore year, all of their junior year, And then the teachers went on strike in their senior year. So their high school experience was trashed while my friends, I'm not calling the governor of California my friend, I don't know the guy, but his kids in private school were going to school while my kids were home doing distance learning, which was just, how would I describe it? A brutal experience to have public school kids isolated for that long. And then even in their junior year, where some in-person learning began in the spring, but it was so heavily regulated that it just didn't make sense to even bother to go to campus. And so my kids just finished out the year, when it was at the busiest time academically of the school year, it just didn't make sense to go to the school. So they literally missed from the end of sophomore year to the beginning of senior year. When they returned to their school, the kids were basically strangers. They had spent this really important, fundamental, formative time sitting in their homes. And I want to tell you, the consistency between classes and the level of service that was provided to the students, I thought was just preposterous. So what happened to me when I wrote about that? Well, using a wartime analogy, like I'm in the foxhole and bullets are flying and I turn around and there's nobody there with me. And fellas, I mean nobody. If there is one way to really curtail your political career and create a ton of headaches for yourself, is taking on the CTA. Okay, there's no future in that. And I didn't mind that they had a designated PR guy trying to yell at my boss, yell at me, threatening to sue me, threatening to sue my employer. I could withstand that heat. I basically moved on from that issue because I made the determination that I spoke to earlier. I just don't think people give a damn. People I know in Sacramento, and I bet you it's the same way in other cities in California. If they have the means, they pull their kids out of public school and they go to private school or parochial school. Or they do what I did with open enrollment. You know where to send your kids to get the best possible experience. And you do. And I make no apologies for that. I wanted my kids to go to public school and they went to the best schools available. And so what you end up having is the people who really suffer are the people who are politically disenfranchised. And then you have parents who know that we could do better. But raising your voice, insist that we do better, all it gets you is getting screamed at, getting threatened, and just getting trolled. And so people who are busy and are trying to go about their lives, they decide it's when the people who are trolling you there's no bottom to how unpleasant they can be. Most just normal people don't want to deal with that. So we go on. And the one constituency that has done great at Sac City have been the teachers, and the students not so much.
So switching gears, but sort of along those lines, our listeners may not know this, but you have the amazing privilege of voting for inductees to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I was just curious, this is maybe a bad joke, but I was curious which readers are worse, teachers unions who disagree with you or sports fans who you've upset. I'm curious which one's worse.
Well, I mean, the teachers, there's actually something like at stake there. And so I, and then the way they play their game is like, well, you hate teachers. No, I love teachers. Yeah. I think there's a more equitable way of it. And there's just no, they've got their talking points down. I don't even bother arguing it anymore. But with the baseball fans on Twitter, especially, or X, I guess they call it now, it was right around the holidays too, of 23. Was it 23? Yes. In the holiday season of 23, because you get just for people, so people know, you become a Hall of Fame voter if you're a card-carrying member of the Baseball Writers Association of America for 10 consecutive years. And it used to be where once you got your card, it was for life. But then in the steroid era, which is when I began voting, they changed it to where if you're not covering baseball over a 10-year, if you're not covering baseball, the clock starts ticking. And if you reach like 10 years of not covering baseball, you cycle out. So I'm going to cycle out in a couple of years unless I jump in and start covering the A's, which is pretty unlikely right now. My day job keeps me really, really busy. And so my first vote was in 2013. It coincided with the first year of Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens on the ballot. And I voted for those two guys every year for the 10 years that they were eligible, and they never got there. So in 23, I ran into, and it's like when you get ratioed on X, you never see it coming. Or at least I didn't see it coming. So I'm a small Hall of Fame. There became this culture within baseball writers that you can vote for up to 10 guys. So you should vote for up to 10 guys. And I've had really smart people who I respect, who are baseball writers, argue passionately to me that on any given year, they see 15 people on their ballot who should belong. And I just don't agree with that. I think that what's made the Baseball Hall of Fame great is that it is hard to get into it. Like the Basketball Hall of Fame, the Naismith Hall of Fame, it seems like everybody can get in. And I understand the criteria is different. They don't just look at what you did in the NBA, it's in college too, and the Olympics. But the Basketball Hall of Fame, to me, seems like the trophy that they give to kids just for showing up. I'm not saying that they put journeymen or bad basketball players into the Hall, but it just seems a lot easier to get in. But in the Baseball Hall of Fame, it had been very difficult to get into the Hall of Fame. And I happen to appreciate that. So in 23, I put on there on my, I tweeted it out that here's my ballot, because, some baseball writers can remain anonymous. And listen, after my experience, I see the reason why some people want to remain anonymous, because immediately it was seized upon that I only voted for 4 people. And I didn't vote for guys like Gary Sheffield, who I thought then and thought now was just a really one-dimensional player who put up big offensive numbers at the heart of the steroid era when numbers just went insane. And so I didn't vote for the guy. So Gary Sheffield Jr., who I think works for the Yankees, seized upon that. And so he sort of amplified it. I made the cardinal mistake of trying to engage people. I knew better. And then the responses just got beyond ridiculous. I started responding with a crying baby meme to all these people. And brothers, I knew what I was doing, okay? The smart thing would have been just to let it go. But I have seen for years now of the holiday season and into January is the season where card-carrying BBWAA members just get caned in the public square. And so I decided just to have some fun with it. And I kept going, and it just grew and grew and grew like nothing I've ever experienced before on social media. And I still hear from people it's 18 months later. And I've continued to post last year I posted my ballot again. And I just took a position that I'm not going to allow myself to be bullied by these idiots who are out there. The baseball writers have had the vote since the 1930s. And my argument with some of these Nimrod sports talk people is you can take any cohort of people now, remove the baseball writers and pick any cohort. When they publicly announce who they're voting for, they're going to get crushed no matter what. And it's just the way it is now. But I like having the vote. I take it seriously. Baseball is my thing, and I'll have the vote until I cycle out. And I will not be intimidated by some of these folks. But for example, when Ichiro Suzuki, so one person didn't vote for him. Okay. Now I happen to think that's not the end of the world. If you get everybody but one, that's a landslide victory. But in our media landscape now, where it's about outrage, every sports talk host seized upon that. And the person, whoever it is, I don't know who it is, chooses to remain anonymous because if you go public like me, you run the risk of just getting crushed. And I think it takes someone insane like me to not really care about it. For some people, they get their feelings hurt on that stuff, so they want to remain anonymous. So in answer to the question, that the teachers thing was much worse because the stakes were much higher. This thing was just, I can't claim to wear the white hat here. I egged it on and enjoyed it while it was happening.
We'll get back to Next Round in just a moment, but first, are you getting PRI's regular email updates? If not, go to pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get the facts you need to fight back delivered every week to your inbox. Every week, PRI sends you what you need to know about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento, and gives you the free market ideas needed to save our state and our nation. By going to pacificresearch.org and clicking the sign up button, you can sign up to have Policy Alert, our weekly roundup of all the best ideas from PRI scholars delivered to your inbox. Or you can sign up for event updates so you're the first to know when PRI is coming to your community with great events. So sign up now at pacificresearch.org and click the sign up button at the top of the page to get PRI's content delivered to your inbox each week.
One thing, and not to be one of those people, but one questionable decision you made was you voted for A-Rod one year and then not the next year. But we'll get to that in a second. That's of course heresy. But one other one that's kind of always stood out to me, and I didn't check how you voted on this, so I actually don't know, and I don't know if you were even eligible to vote back when he was still on the ballot. But one that always stood out to me is Pete Rose is a tragic omission from the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I actually agree with you too that I like a smaller Hall of Fame. I think just because you were an All-Star a bunch of times, you might have been great, but Gary Sheffield, I'm with you. He was great. He was a good player. Hall of Famer. I don't know. He'd be a fringe Hall of Famer for me, and that's not to take anything away from him. It's like someone like Alan Trammell. I mean, I guess if you're a Tigers fan, he's great, but Anyway, what do you think about Pete Rose as a possible Hall of Famer, and why did you go against common sense and vote against A-Rod? And I'm a Yankees fan, just for anybody who is questioning why I love A-Rod so much.
Okay, I'll go with the Pete Rose first. He never appeared on the ballot.
Okay.
He was disqualified, and he agreed to it and signed on the dotted line that his disqualification. Now, people can debate, should the disqualification apply to the Hall of Fame, which technically isn't under Major League Baseball, but it has. I always tell people it's like when I would post my ballot, people would yell at me, "Why didn't you vote for Pete Rose? Not on my ballot. Why don't you write him in?" Because the rules say if you write anybody in, your ballot is disqualified immediately. So then you don't vote for anybody. Well, you should do that. No, I don't think so. I felt like that Pete brought it on himself. That I really humbly believe that if Pete had just fallen on his sword from the beginning, he'd be in the Hall of Fame today. Some disagree with me, but whatever. But he didn't come clean until 15 years later when he was publicizing his book. And he let a bunch of people, including Bill James and a bunch of others, argue on his behalf and then he pulled the rug out from under them to admit it. But eventually, as I got older, I felt like, there should be room for forgiveness, that we're all flawed human beings. But the commissioners, the current one and the previous one just weren't into it. So it never happened while he was alive. And I think it's a shame because, I watched Pete Rose when I was a kid. And who was more fun to watch than Pete Rose? Nobody. But it's just a tragedy the way things turned out. As far as A-Rod is concerned, I did vote for him once. Here's the thing with the whole voting thing is where I eventually landed was, okay, the steroids era happened, and we're still in it. You're still seeing guys like I'm drawing a blank on the player, but a player just recently,
Profar.
Yeah, Jurickson Profar. He's going to miss 80 games. That's half the season, so it's still happening. And just imagine the guys that are not catching, But so it happened, and so people would always say, "Why did you vote for Barry Bonds?" Well, I think it's just a slippery slope to try to cherry pick who you think did and who you think. Some of my colleagues sincerely believe that they can tell who did and who didn't. And I'm like, guys, we don't know. We don't know. So then I voted for him one time because, however we may feel about him as a human being, he was a great player. But I'd stopped voting for him, not out of any moral outrage or whatever, because he clearly did performance enhancing drugs, but just because he's not going to get in. Same thing with Manny Ramirez. He's not going to get in. He's just not, And so I decided that I was just going to, if I'm going to be a small hall guy, I'm going to be a small hall guy. And I'm just going to vote for people who I think are worthy and I think have a chance to get in. But you play all kind of mind games with yourself about that. Like, I didn't put John Smoltz on my ballot the first time he was on because I was like, I talked myself into making a point. Like, people are like, really, listen, do I think he's a Hall of Famer? Yeah. But does he have to be a first ballot Hall of Famer? Well, it's my belief. I could be wrong. It's just my opinion that I think a lot of people gravitated toward him because he's a really likable guy, and elevated him to like a really high vote total because he's kind of an antidote to the difficult characters who were also populating the ballot at that time. Maybe I'm wrong. I probably am. But so I talked myself into not voting for him the first time. And then after a few years of just playing mind games like that, I decided I'm going to vote. My criteria is I'm going to vote for the people who have the traditional metrics, the advanced metrics, and who I think have a shot at getting in based on their vote totals. Because historically, if you don't reach a certain threshold by a certain time, you're not going to get in. And so I just go by the numbers in that sense. And not everybody agrees with that approach, but that's mine.
So continuing on the baseball theme, Sacramento, famously now, is temporarily a Major League Baseball city for the next few years as the A's call the state capital home for 3 or 4 seasons. And, while there were many doubters, I was out there Monday and Tuesday night. I got excited enough to become a new A's season ticket holder. And I thought, what a great experience. The ballpark looked great. I thought there was a great atmosphere out there. And I think it has us all thinking, could Sacramento somehow keep the A's or, even land an expansion team in the future? So you've written about this whole saga extensively. What are your thoughts now that the A's are here and we're going to have them here for a while? And what do you think going forward? Do you think we are on track to, whether if the A's fall apart in Las Vegas or through an expansion team, that Sacramento could one day be a permanent Major League Baseball city?
Listen, as a baseball guy who's lived in Sacramento for 30+ years, I would love that. And I would have to reassess my fandom at that point because I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in the South Bay, San Jose. And when I was a kid, my house was pretty much equal distance, Candlestick Park and the Open Coliseum. And I was lucky enough in the 70s to see a lot of great players on both sides of the Bay. And I always have enjoyed both teams and just have never agreed with those who say you have to pick one or the other. Because I don't feel like I have to. But if there was a team in Sacramento, that would have to become my primary team. I think that the fan base is there and the interest is there. The stumbling block for Sacramento in all things is the corporate base robust enough to support it? And how do you pay for a new stadium? Because you're going to have to get a new stadium. I could be wrong on this, but how do you put another deck on Sutter Health Park? I don't know. And the city of Sacramento certainly couldn't pull it off on their own. And I'm not even sure you'd want to put it in the city of Sacramento. So there's still questions. I'm sure that smart people are pondering. Do I think it's possible? Yes, I do. It's not going to be easy. I mean, we're going to find out within a couple of months about the A's situation. They basically have a couple of months to start putting up real money in Vegas to be able to trigger the public money they are using for gap financing. And the A's are privately confident that they will hit all the thresholds to be able to start playing ball in Vegas in 2028, but they won't go on the record. And as I've told them in conversations, if you don't go on the record with me, then I'm not going to sit here and write about something as if it's going to happen. I'm going to write about it as if it's still a question mark that's going to happen. And in my mind, Vegas is still a question mark. Now, my friends at the A's vehemently disagree with that off the record. That's just where we are with them. And unlike my friends and colleagues in the Bay Area, I don't have a beef with the A's. The Bay Area writers do. I don't. I'm just completely agnostic about their move away from Oakland, their move to Sacramento, and their eventual move to Vegas. That's what happens in sports. Sometimes it's regrettable for sure, but that's just what happens. But I think the play for Sacramento is to try to show up. It's unfortunate that the first week of games didn't go so well, and it was cold, and the A's pitching couldn't get anybody out and gave up a ton of runs and lost 3 games. But that's baseball. but so I think that wealthy people and business people are trying to figure out how Sacramento could get in the game, because Rob Manfred, the current commissioner, has said that he's going to step aside in 2029, and he would like baseball to expand one more time before he goes, to have at least like two more teams. And Sacramento would get in line with Memphis and Portland and all these other cities that want a big league baseball team. And I think our case is strong in Sacramento, and we are lucky enough to have at a minimum a 3-year audition for it, and so we have to make the most of it. But financing is no little thing, and it remains to be seen if our region can pull it off.
Let's talk about the newspaper business real quick. You're opinion editor for one of the most important daily newspapers in the history of American journalism, I think. It's the flagship publication of the McClatchy brand, which is, it's a pretty big deal. But, the Bee is like most other publications in the country. It's struggling for readership. It's struggling for money, and and again, that's not a problem just of the Bee. That's the media business right now. Can you take us inside the newsroom a little bit and just kind of let us know, like, what is it like trying to produce a top quality newspaper in an era where cutbacks, layoffs, people, readers with divided attention, what's it like now trying to work under those circumstances?
I have many conservative friends, and some of them will say to me, Marcos, the problem with you guys is that you're too liberal, and that's what's causing your problems. And my response is, we probably are too liberal. Definitely in our opinion pages in the past, we probably were too liberal. And as the editor, I'm trying to do something about that. But that really doesn't have anything to do with the problems that we're having. There's one word that describes the problems that legacy media has. It's money. The way we made money for a century is gone. And it ended beginning like in 2008 with the Great Recession, coming at the precise moment that social media became ubiquitous in our lives. For example, you had major retailers who used to take out full-page ads in the Sacramento Bee and San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, Oakland Tribune, you name it. Suddenly, with Facebook, they had their own pages and they could communicate with their customers directly. So a lot of those full-page ads, quarter-page ads, that's major money right there, they went away or they diminished. Classified ads used to be a gold mine for a newspaper. Craigslist took care of that, and all that stuff migrated to the digital space. And digital advertising has not kept pace with print. And those things are changing now. Not to get too far in the weeds into it, but that's really where it is. And it didn't resonate far beyond the state capitol. But last year, there was a piece of legislation called AB 886 by Buffy Wicks. And what it called for was to do what Canada is doing and what Australia is doing, which is to essentially make Google and other major aggregators share in some of the digital advertising revenues that they claim. And it didn't get a vote. It didn't result in the legislation being passed, much less signed by the governor. And so until that money issue is solved in some way, all legacy media is going to be having to adjust. And so the way we've adjusted is, we've scaled our business to meet the times, and our newsroom is significantly smaller now than it was in 2007. And I'm fortunate enough to be working for a company where we still believe in opinion journalism, and I have a robust staff of people working for me in Sacramento, Modesto, Fresno, and San Luis Obispo, and we can still call balls and strikes. And I'll tell you, got a lot of media attention when the LA Times and the Washington Post decided not to endorse former Vice President Kamala Harris. And so I kept getting asked the question last fall, what about you guys? What are you doing? Well, we decided in the summer, before there was even a hint that Kamala Harris was even going to run for president, that we weren't going to endorse in the presidential race because we felt that our greatest value was endorsing in local, regional, and state races, particularly these crazy initiatives that are so confusing and so convoluted and so fraught with just California politics that our best play was to really be there. And so, we watched with interest, obviously, as the entire editorial board at the LA Times resigned, and the editorial board at the Washington Post had similar experiences, and we felt very fortunate that we don't have people telling us what to do. On the contrary, we have people encouraging us to be as strong as we possibly can. And I got asked, why didn't you endorse in the presidential race? And my answer is then and now is the same. It's like I was confident Kamala Harris is going to win Sacramento City and County and the state of California with ease. He doesn't need our endorsement. It would be performative if we did that. And besides, the presidential election is a personal choice that people make, particularly in the last 25 years. The reasons that people would make to elect the president range from, it seems like he'd be more fun to have a beer with, to, in the case of President Trump, I'm convinced that people like him. They really like him. And I didn't appreciate how much people liked him in 2016. I do now. And so I just didn't feel like it was where we needed to be. Circling back to where we started on this question is, I think we're in the game because we've scaled our business to the rules of the game now, and I think that we're trying to provide content to the people who are reading us, as opposed to making some statement that we can crow about on social media, which is not where I want us to be.
Kind of one of the things you just mentioned too did remind me of, and you can, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like this idea that a newspaper owner overstepped by dipping into editorial positions, that's not really that uncommon, is it?
No, it's not. And listen, okay, my fellow journalists, I love them, man. And I always say, I say to the folks who report to me, I'm not going to get mad at journalists for acting like journalists, okay? But we have a tendency to get on our high horse, like anybody else does. And so I reflected back to my early career, back in the good old days, okay? What if the editorial board at the Sacramento Bee in the early 1990s, all of a sudden, started really being openly critical of the McClatchy family? How would that have flown? Guys, that would not have flown, okay? And my whole thing is like, guys, let's be honest here, for crying out loud. I can recall when the McClatchy family still owned McClatchy, being asked to be a judge on this big spelling bee that they hosted every year. And it just so happened that the day of the spelling bee, it was during Trump's first term, and the Attorney General of the United States was going to be in Sacramento that day talking about immigration, which is right up my alley. And I tried everything to get out of judging that dang spelling bee. And I was told, no can do, Marcos, because I was wanted there by the owners, okay? What world are we living in, okay? That's the way it is everywhere, in every business. And so, listen, do I wish that, some of the things that are happening at other papers weren't happening? I do. And I don't think that the way some of these folks have gone about it is really the best, but it's not for me to say. I don't work there. Would it be a problem if all of a sudden my folks started dictating to me on things beyond just being obstinate and going against my owners? I wouldn't appreciate that either. I don't anticipate that happening. But to your point, yes, owners have for generations had a say in the editorial policy of papers, and anyone who says otherwise is just not correct.
as we close, I think this would be kind of an interesting point to end on, another kind of kicking us behind the scenes and into your thinking. It's obviously a challenge for you every day to kind of run an editorial page that, as you say, leans to the left politically, but look at our region and the challenge you have, right, in ensuring that what's on the editorial pages, right, reflects all the leaders, right, or all the readers, right, from those who, may live in more rural areas and lean more to the right, and those who are more liberal and live in downtown and midtown. So I think, and it's very admirable, and I applaud you that you really are doing a great job of broadening the perspectives you're seeing on the Bee editorial pages. So when you approach it, what are some of the things that, are your top points that you keep in mind as you're running the editorial page each day? What are you looking for to ensure that really the broad diversity of the community, not just ideologically, but also geographically and interest-wise, is represented on the Bee's editorial pages each day?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's something that's in my mind every day. Now it's hard. It's hard to listen. When I get asked why do guest viewpoints, because we get a lot of them, particularly at different parts when on the legislative calendar, we get a lot of them. What's the difference between one that gets published and one that isn't? And to use crude language, is generally the ones that suck are the ones that don't get published. And it's beyond ideology, is that not everybody can write well, and then in the ideological space, I don't want to be repeating things that I know to be false. Okay. And so that narrows the field, as it were. Listen, we make mistakes too. We're not always as professional as we should be. Opinion writing is you playing with live ammo, and the weapon can go off in your hands and blow up right in your face. And it's happened. It's a human endeavor. But Sacramento is the place that where Cornel West came from and where Rush Limbaugh launched his career. Sacramento, probably our greatest civic leader, Anthony Kennedy, was the kind of Republican that Sacramento used to churn out on an assembly line. Your business Republican. And, he rose to become a very consequential member of the Supreme Court. And when I was still a columnist, I wrote a column about who's the most notable Sacramentan, and he won. It was by a vote of our readers, and so that diversity of thought in our community is a source of strength, and it's baked into our history, and so I think it should be reflected in the pages of the Bee. Do we always do a great job of reflecting them? We don't do as well as we should, but I am trying.
Well, hey, I really appreciate, and I think I can speak for Tim here. We really appreciate you coming on today and spending some time talking to us. We covered a lot of ground. One thing that we always ask every podcast guest is we point out that this is named Next Round because of our proximity to wine country and our love of discussing public policy over a great glass of California wine. So with that said, what beer, wine, cocktail, or other beverage, which could be non-alcoholic, are you enjoying these days that you recommend to our listeners?
If you'd asked me that question 18 months ago, I would have said as a beer guy, I loved past tense, Pliny the Elder. I love, some of my beer friends think I'm insane. They want sours or ambers or whatever. I was an IPA guy, and to me, the Pliny the Elder was the gold standard. About 14 months ago, I made a decision I was going to stop drinking for health reasons, and I only miss my Pliny the Elder when I'm at a ball game, sitting in the sun, because there's nothing better than watching a ball game while drinking a beer. But too many calories, too much sugar, and I just decided to go in a different direction. But I have found Fieldwork does a non-alcoholic IPA that I just had. I watch English soccer at this pub in Midtown Sacramento, and I'm drawing a blank on the prime time, I believe. But Fieldwork is an excellent Bay Area brewery, and everyone's getting into the non-alcoholic realm, and and it's the best tasting non-alcoholic IPA I've come across so far, and I'm gonna keep drinking it.
Well, giving up drinking will make your next trip to an A's game more affordable, having just paid, I think, $21 for a beer at the A's game. We're a major league city, and we have major league prices at the ballpark now.
Yes.
Well, Marcos, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. And for those, our listeners who, want to follow what you're doing, and more importantly, subscribe to the Bee, how do they do it?
Yeah, if you go to www.sacbee.com, there is a place where you can subscribe. I always say a digital subscription is month to month is less than you would pay for your Starbucks coffee. And speaking for the opinion side, we're trying every day to have provocative, engaging content that will be worth your time. And I hope people give us a try.
Well, thanks so much again. Really appreciate your joining us today.
It was my pleasure.
If you like this episode, please tell your friends and subscribe to PRI's podcast at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And when you're on these platforms, don't forget to give us a big 5 stars. If you don't subscribe to any of these, you can still listen on PRI's YouTube page, youtube.com/Pacific Research 1. That's the number 1. Thanks for listening. I'm Rowena Ichon. Hope you'll come back again for Next Round with PRI.